Greetings, magical mages and spiritual sages. Welcome to Age of the Mage podcast, and this is episode 53. We're going to continue on exploring the rest of the magical archetypes, and today we're going to take a look at the Keeper. Now, the 9 magical archetypes are the Warrior, the Healer, the Guardian, the Sage, the Commander, the Oracle, the Keeper, the Builder, and the Weaver. And we've been going through these one by one. Each one of these also has 3 divisions that I have identified. And so just to help us find our place within big, broad categories, it's sometimes easier to look at, all right, how do these particular archetypes actually show up? How do they function in our lives? And what roles do we find ourselves playing with regards to these? And the whole idea behind having some fun with magical archetypes and identifying yourself is to just give yourself some more windows into your magical abilities. Look at them from different angles. Assess your personality through the lenses of magic, through the lenses of spirit and soul, because so many personality systems are out there, and we have fun with these kinds of quizzes, and we learn about ourselves over time. But this, very often, they don't focus anything on magic, and that's what we're here for. That's our whole purpose. So we want to find ways to define ourselves in terms of our magical abilities and in terms of our spiritual gifts and the way we like to use and express these gifts and how they show up in our lives. So archetypes are just historically kind of holistic ways of looking at something that we all identify with, almost at a gut level. We know if we see, and we may not be accurate all the time. If we see someone out in public and they are dressed modestly and they're wearing glasses, and we might assume that they like to read. We might assume they like to work on the computer. Now, this assumption could be wrong, but what's happening when these kinds of things happen, when we have this experience, is the visual effects are triggering things inside of us that we identify as parts, as fractals of a holistic element. So as elements of something holistic. So we come to identify certain things as clues to the bigger picture. And that's what archetypes are. Archetypes are truly this big picture and holistic way of seeing things, and they're based on these primal kind of instinctual feelings that we have acquired through our culture and through our interests and through things that we observe. And so that's what an archetype is basically. And so magical archetypes are just looking at entire, this holistic picture again of a role or a character or a group, a cluster of characteristics that go into the whole, and we function through these aspects of ourselves. So, for instance, let's say you like to read. That could be expressed in many different ways. Perhaps you read and then you share that story with someone else, or perhaps you read for information and then you categorize the information you've learned. Perhaps you read and then you teach that information. So there's many ways to express a general characteristic or a general part of yourself. And those are what we're talking about, these roles and functions that will show up. And the other advantage to looking at these archetypes is so that we can use them later as a team member, as some sort of team member. And when we start working with a group, when we become a team member of sorts, or when we join forces with a friend or an ally and decide to do something together, it can be helpful to understand our role. And of course, we are not locked into any one role. We're so complex, and we have so many varied talents and varied interests, each one of us, so we're unique. And so this is in no way intended to have any of you feel boxed in. If you identify part of yourself in one area, that's not to say that you could not easily learn and develop and express yourself in another area. But typically, as we work through these kinds of self assessments, we find that we quite naturally um, feel an affinity to certain ones and don't feel as close to others. A one with a real strong warrior energy, someone with that type of energy, may not feel that comfortable doing the work of a sage or something. Now, it could be combined, anything could be combined to make these unique and complex combinations that we're all made up of. But I'm just giving an example that we do find that we resonate more strongly to probably 1 to 4 of these archetypes. And so if we were going to team up later on and say, hey, let's go in and do a magical ritual or do some sort of spiritual work or visualization that would pertain to something specific, someone could come along and say, and I'm a really good healer, so I would be there to do anything along those lines. And someone else might say, I'm a protector, so I will protect the space while we work. Someone might be an oracle, and they could take a kind of almost a remote viewing look at the situation and come back and give information ahead of time. So these types of skills can be combined in ways that will really enhance the work. And that's another advantage to getting to know, getting familiar with archetypes and understanding what you like to do from this viewpoint of magic. So today we're going to talk about the keeper. And the keeper is something that you will recognize as we describe it, but it may not be a title or a typical word that just all the ideas come to mind initially. So let's read through the general characteristics of a magical keeper. Keepers love being surrounded by items they've collected and have deemed valuable. Their belongings might not have any earthly monetary value, although that is possible, but they will be priceless in other ways. Keepers tend to find and preserve items that hold a great deal of magical energy. They're often the ones we turn to when we need some sort of unique magical item or tool. Another characteristic of keepers is their natural ability to sort through media and find the most accurate and relevant information available. We might think of them as magical librarians. They often find themselves in charge of large quantities of esoteric and occult information that can be utilized and referenced by others who are looking for specific data. Another part of the keeper's magic shows up through their willingness to hold space for magical workings, and they stand as very perceptive witnesses to events and situations. They often record their observations, and we all benefit by reading or listening to their accounts afterwards. Many keepers have been called bards in times past, as they often express their spiritual gifts through oral traditions and other forms of record keeping. They are sacred storytellers who allow us to bridge to other worlds and other times through their messages. We know we're in the presence of a keeper if we should see such things as elaborate grimoires, detailed scrapbooks, and daily journals. These magical souls feel a deep connection to tangible proofs of things that have happened. They preserve memories, information, traditions, and items so that these precious treasures can be passed down through the ages. So that's an overview of the keeper. And I have divided this group of magical archetype into 3 subdivisions. And the first is the collector, and the second is the archivist, and the third is the bard. So we're going to go on and read a little bit about the collector style of being a keeper. The collector is a keeper with a natural ability to sense and locate uncommon and remarkable objects. From unusual seashells to rare books, these magical keepers are most content when surrounded by their eclectic collections. These gifted souls seem to know when a magical item is nearby, and their heightened senses lead them directly to the item holding the unique etheric energy that they are perceiving. They might even employ techniques such as dowsing in order to zero in on their targets. When they have the object or the book in hand, many can also interpret the energies. This helps them organize their collections according to different categories and types of energy. Even if the collector is unsure about how the item is meant to be used, it will be added to the collection until the time comes when the purpose and energy signature of the item is revealed. Because collectors find themselves in the midst of various types of energy, they utilize their innate abilities of shielding. Advanced collectors can shield themselves from unwanted energies and are also able to construct shielded spaces where they can store some of the intense energetic items they've accumulated. They are adept curators of their own magical museums. And examples of magical icons might be dowsing rods, a magnifying glass, or a compass. So these collectors, they're interesting because while they're very comfortable in surroundings, they're quite adventurous too. They love to be out in the world finding these items they want to collect and often like to travel. They might have interests that overlap with 3D collections like finding gold or finding coins along the beach. And they do have this heightened, in the magical sense, they have this ability to feel, oh, there's an object nearby that carries a great deal of energy and could be used. I know it could be used for something in the future. And their purpose and calling will very often lead them to find these items. And so I've chosen little magical icons for each division. And what that means is if you imagine something that you can actually hold and see in the 3D world. In this case, it was a dowsing rod or a magnifying glass or a compass. And of course, it could be anything meaningful to you. But if you hold something and identify it with your purpose, like, all right, I use this compass when I'm exploring in the woods, when I'm going to come across magical items that might be buried, kind of like geocaching. These kinds of interests are very often enjoyed by the collector. And so that compass reminds you of the 3D experience of actually gathering and collecting. And when you imbue this compass with that kind of energy, it can not only help the compass direct you, but if you work in, when you go to work in etheric realms or astral realms, you can bring that compass into your mind's eye, and you can actually, that tool can actually assist you in the etheric realms just through your ability to visualize that tool. In other words, it's an anchor to your 3D reality, and it's a powerful bridge so that the same types of talents you can use in your 3D world can be used in the etheric fields. And that's the whole idea about magical icons. And they also are fun to have around if you identify 2 or 3 that you really like, that you feel deep connections with. And if they're just sitting on your desk or dresser and you get to see those, it reminds you how magical you truly are and how powerful you truly are. And so that comes into play and can really, really assist you with um, grounding, grounding and manifestation abilities. All right, so let's move on to the second type of keeper. And this would be the archivist. Archivist. The archivist keepers organize and categorize esoteric, magical, and occult information so that they can learn from that information that they've gathered and more easily share their findings with others. These gifted practitioners take pride in developing organization systems to house their discoveries. They are magical librarians who are willing to assist others in their searches for specific information. Not only do they assist fellow magicians, but they themselves are often highly knowledgeable. Most are avid readers and researchers and often share what they've learned. Many produce books, software, and other forms of media based on their research and experience. Archivists are architects of information systems and are highly perceptive when it comes to spotting patterns. They're able to manifest elaborate systems by manipulating patterns in etheric realms and then implement those constructs in the 3D world. These intriguing magicians might be surrounded by stacks of books and sheaves of paper, but when it comes to finding certain information, they know exactly where to find it. They thrive when they're pursuing knowledge and searching for answers to life's many mysteries. Examples of a magical icon might include a handmade bookmark with a sigil on it that means something to the magician, a geode, or a complex crystal lattice. So these are complex thinkers. They think in terms of patterns they have observed, and they are able to put their bits of data and information they gather into categories and then build a system around that. You might see people that are software engineers or something along those lines also um, overlapping that kind of ability that they do in the 3D world with their jobs or something or interests with this type of organization, having a special interest in gathering esoteric materials, and information is important to this style of keeper. They might also collect objects, of course, but the first style keeper, while they are out in the world, you know, on literal treasure hunts, so to speak, this archivist is more at home perhaps and even more interested in categorizing and organizing information that they've learned, that they use themselves, and also that they could share and feel will be worthwhile to others who share interests that they have. And so this is a kind of an architect of information, systems on how to disperse information, how to organize it, how to share it, that type of thing. All right, and we finally come to the last type of keeper that I'm going to go ahead and call the bard because it's such a fitting name. And so we're going to read about that a little bit. The bards are keepers who hold stories, memories, sounds, and other traditions within their souls. And then they share these collected treasures with others through a means of storytelling or song. They're also willing to bear witness to rituals, ceremonies, and other meaningful events and record the activities they observe. Bards are often blessed with expansive memories and enhanced capacities to remember stories and oral accounts. Some are gifted with extra language abilities, which allow them to gather information from different cultures and other dimensions that could require translations. When bards share their stories through voice or song, their magical energies reach out into the surrounding atmosphere and infuse the air with etheric signatures. Some of these etheric tendrils connect to the original events themselves and are able to convey the prime energies associated with those events. This is why, as bards develop, they hold such a great deal of power and must learn how and when they should wield such power. As others feel and absorb those energy strands that the bard is creating through the storytelling experience, the bard must learn how to control the release of that energy so as not to overwhelm the audience. It's similar to a singer learning how to properly control breathing and the diaphragm in order to produce the purest sounds. Bards sometimes choose to learn to play various musical instruments too, as the instruments provide effective ways to enhance the story's energy through resonant sounds, and bards are naturally attuned to sound signatures. And examples of magical icons could very well be a favorite musical instrument. And I've added a feathered cap. A feather represents very often the carrying, like birds on wings, the carrying of energy through the air. And so just for fun, I've added this feathered cap. So yes, The bard is probably very familiar to you. Sometimes people are bards, of course, without ever knowing it. You might have sat around and listened to a grandparent tell stories and just thoroughly enjoyed hearing them, even if you were hearing them over and over again. That grandparent might have had a natural talent for really holding the whole energy signature of the event and of the story. And as they tell it, that is transmitted to the audience. And so all kinds of storytellers are blessed with this bard energy, and they may not be aware of it in any kind of way that they purposely develop it or use it. But as a magician, as one as someone working with things of the spirit, things of the soul, and these energies, you can do so very much with this, and you can learn how to develop this skill. And if you wanted to create music or create stories, you can infuse these with additional energetic signatures just by becoming aware of how to work those in, and how to, you know, keep those attached to your actual words and to the sounds you make as you share those words and those sounds. Though this does not have to be oral, this can be written out. Bards can be writers, can be storytellers through those means. Absolutely. But you will find very often that the bard, the keeper who is a magical bard, will very often land in the center of a gathering and will be sharing what happened to them recently, or will have the talent to share a song or play a piano piece, or will be the person that sits down with the guitar around the campfire and lead others in song. So these very 3D type experiences are the bridge. The bard has these very often as natural talents, and then when you add the magical elements to it, it just becomes even more potent. And so they can literally go into groups, and they can bring the elements of certain tones or sounds that they know will enhance that group activity. They may want to share, if you're working from a distance and you're working with allies from all over the world on a project, the bard may be the one that says, all right, before we begin, everyone should play this piece of music, or something along those lines, because that bard is going to have a very strong sense of resonance, and particularly through wavelengths of sound, frequencies that are associated with sound. And the more this bard develops and progresses, they can actually fill um, little capsules that with sound, with more holistic energy, a hologram, so to speak. So if they are going to tell a story, they can infuse each part of that story with the whole story, and it becomes quite a fascinating magical journey to take if this is something that you feel naturally attuned to. All right, so that is kind of an overview of the various types of keepers. And I hope you'll enjoy that and give the keeper archetype some thought and see, ask yourself, do I fit in there? Is that what I've been doing without even knowing? And you might be able to, even if this is a line that's very aligned with you, then you might even be able to brainstorm ways that you could start using these talents on your own in solitary practice, as well as how would I ever use that if I teamed up with someone? How would I use this? And just brainstorm and have some fun with it. So I will be back shortly, and we will be going over the builder archetype next. And thank you again for listening. I hope all of you experience wonderful days, wonderful evenings ahead, and I will say goodbye for now.